Greetings, friends, fellow patriots, fellow citizens, and even non-citizens, and welcome to this week's edition of the We the People Convention Weekly News and Opinion Podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and I'm the host of this podcast, and I'm also the president of the We the People Convention organization. And this podcast and our wonderful website and our texts and our emails and our donations to other conservative groups and individuals who join us in our fight to protect and defend individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity, those efforts are paid for by the generous donations of the donors to the We the People Convention. And if you are able, if you have the means to help support our organization and support our fight, please go to wethepeopleconvention.org and click on the donate link and give what you can. And if you want to know why you should do that, just click on the little block on the front page of the website that says, learn about the We the People Convention and what we've done in our 16-year history to protect and defend our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. I can't thank you enough for taking your time to tune into this week's podcast. I know, and you know, it is getting harder and harder to find out the truth about anything in our world. And there's reasons for that. And it's really concerning. So, for instance, when the Tea Party movement started back in 2008 and 9, it was the fake news. There was the ABC, CBS, NBC that were dominating the message that was communicated to the American people, and it was a progressive anti-American message. It was a message of control, and we now know that. We've proven that by exposing the censorship they were doing to social media, even not just to these news, supposed news. They were really propaganda entities. But Donald Trump blew that up when he just started calling them fake news and then started showing the receipts. And we did that. And you watch this podcast because what we do is we look at the quote-unquote news and get rid of the propaganda and try to actually find some truth that we can share with you so that then we can take action collectively as citizens to advocate for the things that make America better, that make our lives better, that protect and defends our individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. But as an example of how difficult this is getting, we're looking for trusted sources. And as we've talked on this podcast, people that we kind of, helped us in 2024, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Alex Jones, Steve Bannon. Well, now, I've canceled my membership to Tucker Carlson. I don't even know where he's coming from. I don't know where these people are. They're not speaking for me. They're not speaking about America, and they're not giving me the truth that I seek. I've started to go back to people like Glenn Beck. Why? Because we've known Glenn Beck for the whole time that we've been in existence, and he's not changed. He's not always right. He'll tell you that. But he is honest about what he's trying to do. He's working hard to find the truth. But I went to listen to Glenn Beck one day this week. Honest to God, I switched to the station using iHeartRadio to watch Glenn Beck, and I heard 9 stories in a row. 9 stories from ABC News leading into the Beck show. All 9 of them were as negative as you could get about America, the economy, the war, as you could possibly get. And I knew for a fact that at least 5 out of the 9 were total lies, total fabrications. And I said to Nan, anyone that was listening to this would think America's a disaster, that we're losing the war, the economy's horrible, everything's terrible. How do we survive this? And so to continue what I was saying at the beginning, we used to have a narrow silo of quote unquote the legacy media that was really propagandist going back to Walter Cronkite, okay? But at least there was a consistent message. What happened is when Donald Trump blew up the news, what did we do? We created the Dan Bongino show, and we created, we had Rush Limbaugh, but after Rush's death, then you got all these other people, Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk's show and all these things. But now what we've got is we don't have a unified message. None of us are getting the same damn information. So when we try to act, this group's concerned about, arresting the people that stole the elections. This group's about, UFOs. This group's about the war. And it's now harder for us to know what's going on in our world because we're all just getting a slice of it that's based on an agenda. And it's stunning how many important things we have no idea about. And I'll use an example, the tornadoes. I've mentioned it in our podcast and I want to mention it again. It has been an amazingly devastating tornado season around the country. And our hearts go out to those of you who've been impacted by this. It's like every bloody night. And I watched this internet weather forecast guy called Ryan Hall, y'all. That's a really cool YouTube podcast. He does great work so you can see what's going on. And I mean, last night, the night before, not one or two tornadoes, dozens of tornadoes, devastating towns and things. Do you hear any news about that? Do you even know about that? I have to go look afterwards and go, man, wonder what happened to those people. All right. And it's you got to really spend your time to go seek it out because I don't see that on Fox News. I don't see it on these other channels. And people's lives are being impacted. But here's the other upside of that story. How few deaths there are. What an amazing achievement we've done to protect people from even things like tornadoes. That's a real story about how few people are dying in these tornadoes, thank God. But I'm just using it as an example of that's real news. That's real news. What's happening to some freak congressmen, who raped women? Yeah, that's news too. But they just dominate the narrative when it should be just a part of the narrative. I'm sorry to go on this rant, but that's why you watch this podcast, because you're trying to understand what the heck is going on in our country and in the world and how it affects you and your family and your children and your community. And that's what we're all trying to do. But it's getting harder and harder. And I've talked to you guys about this. And again, I'm not going to be a victim, okay? I'm not going to you say, oh, woe was me. I'm just telling you the truth. Whatever the heck is happening to the We the People convention is having a devastating effect. Every single matrix. I don't care. I sent out, when the SPLC, the story broke, and we're going to cover that in this podcast, and that's a very important story, okay? The Southern Poverty Law Center, corruption, indictment is a big story. I sent out a text message to like 30,000 of you. Normally, when I would do that, we would get 10,000 people to our website almost immediately. We got like 160. How is that possible? Did you not get the text messages? Because I don't believe that those of you who signed up to get our text messages because you want to know what's going on aren't going to respond. But I don't care whether it's our emails, our text messages, our YouTube, our podcast. I've been telling you for weeks about how all of a sudden nobody listens to our podcast audio anymore. Just disappeared from 1,750 a week to 175, right? Why? Why is that? We're being censored. We are being censored. Our message, this podcast, they don't want you to know what's going on. And so it's more important than ever that you share this podcast, because my ability, our organization's ability to get it out is becoming reduced down to nothing. They want us to go away. They want us to go away. We're staying in the fight. We're doing our best. I think you're going to love this podcast. But I want you to know We have never been censored like we're being censored now. I mean, even under Obama, even under Biden, the Trump FCC is literally putting our family business our company out of business this coming month in May. We're going to shut down because they have taken away our ability to use technology to help the grassroots and help ourselves organize and win. They won't let us make robocalls anymore. They won't let us do polling anymore. We're literally going to go out of business because the Trump FCC is infringing on our First Amendment rights to political free speech. We can't, in the Portage County Tea Party, we defeated every school levy in our county that we opposed for 10 years by doing one simple thing. We would make a phone call, a robocall to everyone in that school district to say, hey, by the way, there's an election this coming Tuesday in the summer that you don't even know about, and your school's putting a, whatever, 5 mil, 4 mil, whatever, levy on the ballot. Now, since you don't know what a mill is, we're going to tell you that this will raise your property tax if your home is valued at $100,000 by $250 a year on top of the $1,200 you're already paying. You might want to go vote. If you want to give them the money, vote yes. If you don't, vote no. We didn't even tell them to vote no. We defeated every levy just by informing the public. You know what? I can't do that anymore. It's illegal. It's illegal. They have now said, and this started with the Biden administration in 2023, that political calls are not exempt from the do not call list and from the rules about opting in. Okay? So now, if I want to call the people in the school district, I got to get them to opt in before they get to call. How am I supposed to do that? How am I supposed to do that? But do those people have a right to know that there's a levy on the ballot? And oh, by the way, the school district ain't calling them for sure, right? Because they don't want you seniors to show up. They're telling the kids to take this home to their parents, the union literature about why, the school's going to go to hell if you don't pass this. But they don't want the seniors to know about it. That's called free political speech. We are being denied that by the Trump FCC, by Brendan Carr, who I have written to 4 times since last March. I've had Senator Bernie Moreno go to the FCC in person and talk to them and say, these people are being discriminated against. This organization, the We the People Convention, helped elect me by getting people out to vote, and you're not letting them. And they've done nothing. That's not an accident. That's intentional. And Republicans are doing it. And why are they doing it? Because it's all pay to play. It's all pay to play. Axios came out with a story this week that just shook me to my foundation. Because in Ohio, one of the targets is Senator John Huston. If the Dems are going to take back the Senate, they must take the seat that John Huston holds with Sherrod Brown, the one that Bernie Moreno got rid of. My understanding was that we spent $50 million when Moreno and Brown were in the election in 2024. We spent $50 million to elect them. And that was $100 million, which blew my mind. It's unbelievable. The Axios story came out this week and said the highest spending Senate election ever was the 2024 election in Ohio. Folks, listen to this. $450 million was spent on one election. How do we defeat that? But you know what we did? We defeated by making robocalls, by sending out emails that people actually got, by doing text messages, by doing YouTube videos, by doing sine waves and barn billboards. They're taking it all away from us. Because even with their $450 million, we could affect the elections. But now we can't. This is so serious. Because it's not just the Democrats. It's not just the left. You're going to see in this podcast, it's the RINOs. It's the deep state. And that's why you watch this podcast, because we're going to arm you with the weapons to fight. And as long as we can get this message out and you can share it, we can win. I still intend to win the war this November. And I'm going to give you examples of why I think that's going to happen. But I want you to understand that freedom is not free. And you've got to fight the fight or you will not be free. We are going to fight the fight. We're going to fight the fight no matter what. But we also are realistic about how tough that fight is to win. And I wanted to share that with you at the start of this podcast before we get into the actual news. Okay? Hope that was informative to you. It's the reality of our existence. So let's get on with it. Let's learn the truth about what's going on. Just got to start with the war, because that's the most important thing going on. Trump envoys Witkoff and Kushner to fly to Pakistan for Iranian talks. You know, this is kind of a on-again, off-again thing, and I'm going to explain why that is, all right? Donald Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and U.S. President's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are headed to Pakistan right now, this morning, to try to talk to the Iranians. The Iranians want to talk, White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt said. By the way, Karen Leavitt, what a patriot she is. She is literally days away from having her baby, and she worked this week. And then she finally said, I got to go have my baby. Pray for her, and that her baby is healthy. She is healthy. What a patriot that woman is. My goodness gracious. And what a great professional she is. Karen Leavitt said, adding that U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance was on standby to travel if the talks proved successful. Iranian government said its foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, was already in Pakistan, in the Pakistan capital, Islamabad, but did not mention any potential talks. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Tehran had a chance to make a good deal, stressing all they have to do is abandon nuclear weapons in a meaningful and verifiable way. Okay? So let me play this clip that should shed some light, because the reason everything's like, what are they doing? Who knows what they're doing? Is because they're in disarray. Listen to this clip.
Victoria, the White House is saying that a delegation will depart tomorrow for Pakistan from the United States for more negotiations. I guess Kushner, Witkoff, others are ready, but Iranian state media rejected that they're going to take place with Araghchi. Is this a symptom or a sign, not a symptom, of Iran not having a clear or understood leadership at this point?
Oh, I think that's very clear, Laura. What you might call command and control has not existed in Iran for 2 months, ever since that decisive first strike in the first night of Operation Epic Fury, when we took out the supreme leader and 40 of their top people. And so Iran is on the back foot. They're completely confused. They can't communicate. All credit to the president for sending Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff to Islamabad. They will negotiate with whatever shows up from Iran. But the terms are clear. I mean, this really isn't a discussion. It's saying, here are the terms. If you would like to survive as an entity, you will accept this. And if you won't, we're going to go in and destroy you. So this should be very, very simple. But the disarray in Tehran is clear.
So that's important for you to understand. And I've got a great article coming up at a couple segments here that explains kind of what's happening there, all right? But what you need to know is, despite the propaganda from the U.S. media and from Iranian sources that, oh, the U.S. is losing the war, how could you possibly believe that nonsense? But the Democrats are out there. Hakeem Jeffries, Donald Trump's war is bankrupting America. It's destroying our economy. It's illegitimate. It's all garbage, folks. That's garbage. Reject it. So the blockade is holding. Our blockade of the Iranian ports are holding. Like I told you last week, they're losing like $438 million a day, and they are reaching a critical state where they literally can't survive. Listen, this is the greatest thing going. Economics doesn't care about ideology. Doesn't matter what your religion is, what your beliefs are. You either have the money or you don't. They're to the point now where they can't pay their Iranian Republican Guard people. They can't, their economy is collapsing, okay? And we're doing everything you can to make sure that continues. Here's the Secretary Bessent, okay, who's talking about how we're crushing them individually by confiscating their funds. Listen to this.
Yeah, I think that's not a correct characterization. Yesterday, we announced Operation Economic Fury, and we, for over a year, we have had maximum pressure on the Iranians, both on blocking payments into the Iranian state and going after the accounts of the IRGC. One of what may prove to be fatal mistakes that the Iranians made was bombing their GCC neighbors, and who are now willing to be much more transparent in terms of the funds or do a deeper dive in investigating the funds that are held within their banking systems. So we have pushed out to them the request that we want to freeze more funds of the leadership of the IRGC and any members of Iranian leadership. The other thing that we have done is we have told countries that if you are buying Iranian oil, that if Iranian money is sitting in your banks, we are now willing to apply secondary sanctions, which is a very stern measure, and the Iranians should know that this is going to be the financial equivalent of what we saw in the kinetic activities.
Yeah, the financial equivalent of the absolutely devastating, overwhelming campaign, naval and air campaign, to sink their navy, destroy all their airplanes, blow up all their missiles, bury their nuclear reserves, and kill all their leaders. Now, this economic campaign is going to be more devastating, literally. All right? So don't believe the propaganda. It's just not true. And part of it mentioned sanctions. Again, I tell you every week, it's all about China. It's about China. So what else did Bessent do? The Treasury Department on Friday sanctioned a Chinese refinery and 40 shipping firms and vessels found to be providing a lifeline to the Iranian oil economy. The move, shared with Epoch Times ahead of the announcement, marks the latest measure from the Trump administration to cut off key revenue sources for Iran, which authorities said has enabled Tehran's reckless activities throughout the Middle East. The targeted Chinese company is Hengli Petrochemicals Refinery Company, the second largest independent oil refinery in China and one of Iran's largest customers for crude oil and petroleum products. The Treasury Department said Hengli has purchased Iranian petroleum worth billions of dollars. As the largest buyer of Iran's oil, China is roughly 90% takes in 90% of Iranian oil exports, except they're not exporting anymore because of the blockade. Let's see here. Small to medium-sized refineries, also known as teapots, are major crude oil purchasers. Among the shadow fleet vessels identified on Friday are a number of oil tankers from Hong Kong. One of them, Marshall Islands flagged but owned by China-based shipping company, has transported millions of barrels of Iranian high-sulfur fuel oil over the past few months, according to the Treasury authorities. The sanctions took place this week, and that's being shut down. China is going to be screaming bloody murder to the Iranian delegation, saying, you got to settle this thing because they're the ones getting hurt. We're not the ones getting hurt because we drilled, and we've got oil and gas, okay? And so that's what's important. So let me get to this article that, I said might give us some insights. Because, again, I'm searching for the truth just like you. And that's why I ask you every week, send me articles, send me information that you verified that is true that I can include in this podcast. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Send me stuff because we want the truth in this podcast, and it's not easy to find it. So I found this story from a source I've never before gone to. Iran International is a website. And this is Behind Tehran's Unity Show, The Secret Letter to the Shadow King by the Iranian International Executive Editor. The real story behind Tehran's sudden unity campaign did not begin with Donald Trump's accusations of disarray within Iranian leadership. It began with a secret letter to the new Khomeini leader. In recent days, word has circulated in Iranian political circles about a highly confidential letter reportedly written by a group of senior officials to Khomeini. According to those familiar with the matter, the letter warned that Iran's economy situation is grave, that the country cannot continue on its current path, and that leadership has no practical choice but to negotiate seriously with the United States over the nuclear issue. Okay? Surrender. Here's the terms. We're not negotiating. You got to do this or you're dead. You're done. That's what she said in that clip. The historical echo is hard to miss. In the final days of the Iran-Iraq War in 1988, senior Iranian officials and commanders warned the senior Khomeini that the war could no longer be sustained. Only days earlier, Khomeini had still been insisting on continuing war, but under the weight of those warnings, he accepted the UN Security Resolution and ended the conflict, a decision he famously likened to drinking from a poisoned chalice. That's why the current letter matters. It suggests that some senior figures now see the nuclear standoff as another moment when ideological insistence is colliding with the limits of the state and the economy. Trump's got him. He's got him. All you got to do is spread the word. Share that story. It'll be linked on our podcast page because they can't survive. The economic pressure will bring them to their knees. And that's what we need. Trump's going to get everything. And maybe say a prayer today because their meetings may be going to meet in Pakistan that we get the peace we're looking for. We want the war to end, but, you're fighting people who like to blow themselves up, who want to die for Allah, right? So they're not exactly rational, but like I said to you before, economics doesn't care. We don't care. You can't be irrational. You can't blow up people if you don't have the bombs, if you don't have the money to buy the materials, if you don't have the money to pay the people, to train the people who want to blow up bombs, okay? That's why the economic war is the right war. How about a little credit for President Trump and his team? Huh? How about a little credit? Oh, yeah. You won't see that in U.S. media. You'll see it here. Okay, so the story of the week beyond the war was the bombshell announcement. DOJ and FBI charged Southern Poverty Law Center with funding extremist groups. This is an absolutely amazing story, but not one that you and I are surprised by. What we're surprised by is that finally, the people we elected to work for Donald Trump, we elected Trump to get people to bring these stories out, and it's finally happening, and this is a big one. The Southern Poverty Law Center was indicted Tuesday on federal fraud charges alleging it improperly raised millions of dollars to secretly pay leaders of the Ku Klux Klan and other hate groups for inside information, according to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche and the FBI Director. The Justice Department alleges the civil rights group defrauded donors by using the money to fund the very extremism it claimed to be fighting, with more than $3 million paid to informants through a now-defunct program to infiltrate white supremacists and other extremist groups. Prosecutors allege some of the money was used by extremists to carry out other crimes, but court papers did not include specific examples. Okay? The SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purported to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred, Blanche said. Let me read that again. I didn't read it well enough. The SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purported to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred, Blanche said. The civil rights groups face charges of wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering in the cases brought in the federal court in Alabama, where the organization is based. The indictments came shortly after the SPLC revealed the existence of a criminal investigation into its disbanded information program to gather intelligence on extremist grouping activities. A reporter asked Blanche, okay, you're alleging that the Southern Poverty Center was paying the leaders of the KKK and other groups. Todd Blanche said, I'm not alleging it. The grand jury just returned an indictment that says it's true. They're not alleging. This article is saying they're alleging. The SPLC said it was vigorously defend ourselves, our staff, and our work against what it describes as false allegations. The group said its informants program saved lives. Now, I'm going to play for you a clip from, yes, CBS News. where, yeah, they're going to try to give both sides, but it is really important for you to see the changes that are happening at CBS now that people who are not woke have bought the company and have put people in charge of it that were looking to do real news. Here's their report.
40 years ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center bankrupted the Klan and later recovered millions from neo-Nazi groups, with lawsuits representing victims of violence. But Tuesday, the tables turned. The Justice Department charged the organization with fraud for allegedly misleading donors and lying to financial institutions by paying members of violent extremist groups millions of dollars to act as informants.
The SPLC was not dismantling these groups. It was instead manufacturing the extremism it purports to oppose by paying sources to stoke racial hatred.
Including, the indictment alleges, a leader of the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, who, quote, attended the event at the direction of SPLC, made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC, and helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. But Law Center interim president Brian Fair said the group had long used informants and called the indictment a political attack by the Trump administration.
They have made no secret of who they want to protect and who they want to destroy.
You have.
Yeah, so there you go. That's CBS. And again, play the victim. Oh, we did this. They got him cold. We did this. And again, how about the Charlottesville guy? They paid him to actually organize the event, to post the things that would stoke the violence. You and I, the We the People convention, literally, when the Charlottesville event happened, I said publicly that the FBI needs to get all the emails and text messages from the Democratic governor of Virginia and the mayor of Charlottesville, because this was a setup. This was a setup that was intended to do what? Bring down Donald Trump. And what did you have Joe Biden say when he ran for president? I ran for office because I saw the veins bulging out of those torch-carrying white supremacists in Charlottesville. Ladies and gentlemen, it's propaganda. It was from the beginning. The problem is it took 8 years for us to get the facts. And so now they're talking about, not only can the groups that were targeted, like Turning Point USA, okay, sue the SPLC, but their donors can now sue because they were defrauding them. They're saying, donate to us so we can fight racism, and they were fueling it. Because, folks, we have been exposed to the biggest psyops in history. Your and my life is a psyop. Because here's the proof. This is a little chart that's out there that says the rise of white supremacy was media-generated narrative, and it's observable. Look at that chart of the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post. There was no talk of white supremacy until they instigated, till they created it, till they lied about it to what? Convince you in America that we're a bunch of racists. No country has been less racist in the history of the world than the United States. Before Barack Obama, we had reached a pinnacle of racial, where we just didn't care. We loved what Martin Luther King. We believed that our children should be judged on the content of the character, not the color of skin. You and I believed that and lived that. We didn't give a damn what color you were. If we were a racist country, how come a black woman like Oprah Winfrey could become a billionaire in a racist country? Why would the TV stations put her show on if we were racist? How could football stars and black athletes become multimillionaires? Michael Jordan said it perfectly well when he was saying, why don't you speak out more against Republicans? He said, because Republicans buy sneakers too. And we did, because we didn't care that Michael Jordan was black. We cared that he was the greatest basketball player of all time. That was America pre-Barack Obama. And by electing, many of you thought that by electing Barack Obama, that proved that we were the least racist state, because that was the thing they held over our heads. Oh yeah, you're still racist because you haven't elected a black president. Well, first of all, he wasn't black, he was mulatto because his wife was white, his mother was white, okay? But we did it. And instead of getting credit for it, they jammed this crap up our butts. And Barack Obama then went on with his racist Attorney General Eric Holder to just basically claim every lie you can make about racism in America. Do you understand? You see what a psyops this was? This is disgusting. They invented the white supremacy lie. You and I, we're in the conservative movement. They're telling us there's a Nazi behind every tree. How come you and I never met one? You think we wouldn't meet one? Do you know any white supremacists? Yeah, there's people who are racist. I'm not saying that's not true. How many blacks are racist? Every poll you ever saw showed that blacks were more racist against whites than whites were against blacks. Just go look it up, okay? This SPLC thing is critical because it's going to destroy them. They're going to go bankrupt by their own donors suing them and these other groups, okay? But this is the degree. It's the left. It's the same way with the illegal immigrants and things. They just create a narrative that's made out of whole cloth, and then they sell it to you to rob you blind and don't help any of the people they claim to help. If the Democratic Party is so interested in helping black Americans, how come most black Americans that live in their blue cities are in utter poverty and despair? Yeah. How many black babies have they aborted? Yeah, answer that question. So then this is just, the SPLC is a look into what we're against, because these people hate America. So what happens this week too? Latest SCOTUS leak, a gift to liberals salivating over control of the high court narrative, says experts. Okay, so this week, remember, with the Roe versus Wade abortion decision in the Supreme Court, for the first time ever, some lefty activist, maybe one of the Supreme Court lefty justices, leaked the decision discussion before it was announced. That never happened before. To do what? To damage the court. This week, they did it again. Let's see here. The Supreme Court leak is giving liberals new ammunition in their long-running criticism of the emergency docket after recently published internal memos showed how the High Court fast-tracks major cases, a process that critics say has served to advance key parts of President Donald Trump's agenda in his second term. Now, they'll notice, though, you won't hear them saying about how they did this before we had control of the Supreme Court. They did it all the time with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the liberal justices when they had control of the court. Oh, but that was okay. But it's not okay because Roberts is doing it and Trump benefits. The liberals are salivating over this. They're very happy because it reinforces their narrative, said Texas College of Law professor Josh Blackman. The memos published Saturday by the New York Times offered a rare look at how Chief Justice John Roberts pressed the court in 2016 to quickly block President Barack Obama's Clean Power Plan. But the immediate concern now is not about what the documents revealed about the Supreme Court's emergency docket, but rather the leak itself, according to experts who said it was a deliberate attempt to damage the court's credibility. That's exactly what they're trying to do. They're illegitimate. If they say Trump is right, they're illegitimate. But when they said Barack Obama was right or Joe Biden was right, oh, that's legitimate. Do you see how they do this and how they do it? Illegally. It's illegal to to give these documents to the New York Times. And so, I think it was Turley, the guy who speaks on Fox, said the FBI needs to investigate because Roberts clearly can't control his court. He's got leakers in the Supreme Court and he can't fix it. The bigger issue is people are leaking stuff to try to hurt the court. That's the bigger story. This was done to try to make the court look bad, make Roberts look bad, and so that they can try to change the court. Okay? That's what they're trying to do. They are the ones who are destroying our institutions, but what do? They say it's you and I. That's what they say. So then we got this going on. The House is investigating Act Blue. Act Blue is you see Win Red if you donate to Republicans. Act Blue is the website that handles all the donations to Democrats. House investigation finds Act Blue took in illegal foreign donations. That has been an accusation since Barack Obama. Barack Obama got millions, if not tens of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, to win his elections from foreign countries that wanted to destroy America. And Barack Obama was the man for the job, okay? You and I didn't elect Barack Obama, foreign interests did. And here's the evidence, okay? Act Blue is one of the largest and biggest leftist fundraising platforms in the land, and it's long been the subject of scrutiny and criticism from conservatives who argue that it does not vet the huge number of small donor donations it receives and is a major conduit for foreign money to affect our elections. It has taken over $16 billion since its founding in 2004, which just happens to be right when Barack Obama was coming on the scene. They, of course, cry innocent at every turn, but they act awfully suspicious in front of the congressional hearings, according to a bombshell joint interim report from the Judiciary Administration and Oversight Committee released Monday. If you have nothing to hide, why the silence? And when I say silence, I mean complete refusal to answer questions from Congress. Almost 150 times they took the fifth. Right? And I'll tell you, taking the fifth is not admitting of guilt, but usually it is. Okay? Last year, we found that Act Blue, the a leading online fundraising platform, weakened its fraud prevention standards ahead of the 2024 election. So they changed the form that you could make donations, so they didn't check the CZV code. Okay? So they didn't check that they were coming from America. They were coming from overseas. New reports have confirmed our findings. Act Blue accepts illegal foreign donations en masse. Act Blue tried to cover this up by misleading, withholding documents for Congress, but it didn't work. On Monday, meanwhile, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the outfit for allowing fraudulent and foreign donations to undermine the integrity of our nation's elections. Okay? These people need to go to prison. They were money laundering. They were violating banking rules. They were violating credit card rules. And they were funding the left to steal our nation. They've got to be stopped. I think they're being stopped. And this is another way we're going to win the war in November, okay? And then you had this great statement, because your state, you need to take action in your state if you don't have this kind of law. Election integrity advocates praised Nebraska's ban of foreign funding of ballot issues. The bill LB 927 was passed Friday by the Nebraska legislature, and Wednesday reached Governor Jim Fallon's desk for a signature. So what does this mean? The executive director of Honest Election Project, John Sneed, told the Center Square the ballot measures are critical for elections, like levies and constitutional amendments to that, and can remake the Constitution, redefine our rights, and rewrite the rules of elections. No foreign billionaire or foreign funded group should be able to interfere in decisions as essential as this, and the ballot measure should never be a Trojan horse for foreign influence. The bill LB 927 was passed on Friday and is going to be signed to stop that. In Ohio, we had a ballot initiative, a constitutional amendment to allow abortion, basically. And the language was misleading, okay? And it was all, a Swiss billionaire gave like $4 million to that effort in Ohio. How is that legal? Because in Ohio, we didn't stop it, okay? Is it stopped in your state? Here's a direct ask. We don't just talk on this podcast. We take action. Will you investigate in your state if you have laws forbidding foreign influence in ballot issues, at least, and also for candidates? Why should foreign people be able to put money into state races? That's an ask. Do your homework. Find out what's going on in your state, and then organize to stop it. Now, this was also a very important story this week, which I texted to you for you to share and for you to read. This is the face of the Marxist destruction of America. The Dems will do exactly what he says if we don't stop them. This is James Carville. He's a nut job. He's a literal lunatic, okay? And thankfully for us, he's stupid enough to say the quiet part out loud. And so you are being given an incredible opportunity. Carville spills the beans about the Dems' plans, and you should too. Veteran Democratic strategist James Carville told Democrats to prepare for D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood and the expansion of the Supreme Court once they retake power, but warned them to keep quiet about it until they win, which is why you should share this article with everyone you know so they understand what the Democrats are going to do if we ever allow them to win again, and why you should stop them. Veteran Democratic strategist James Carville suggested on Thursday that Democrats should quietly prepare to launch a variety of structural changes to ensure a political advantage once they regain power. Exactly what they claim Trump is trying to do, but it's okay for them to do it, but not for Trump. And oh, by the way, they already tried to do it under Biden, and Trump is just reversing it, and then they're going to claim victimhood. Trump's trying to stop us from doing everything. Except they already did it. He's a hypocrite. He's a nut job, and he hates America, and he has a plan to destroy it. Carville and his co-host Al Hunt on the Politics War Room Project took questions from listeners on an episode released Thursday. One asked whether Democrats should fund the zone with a corrective implementation policy using their majority to just change everything. And Carville said, if the Democrats win the presidency and both houses of Congress in 2029, I think on day one, they should make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state, and they should expand the Supreme Court to 13 members. 13 members. F it. Eat our dust, he said. Statehood for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico are believed to be overwhelming favors for Democrats, likely giving them 4 more Senate seats so they can get to 60 votes and pass anything. This move, along with expanding the Supreme Court, would likely be viewed by Republicans as a power grab in the pursuit of ensuring party politics dominance. You think? Listen, when they say we're going to expand the Supreme Court while they're in power, it means that the 9 justices we have now, right, 5-4 conservative, supposedly, all right, you make that 13, every one of them is a lefty. Every one of them appointed for life. It's over. You now have rule by court, by corrupt court, by kangaroo courts. Okay? That's on top of, we're going to impeach Trump on day one. That's on top of, we're going to try to criminally prosecute all of his staff, everyone that worked in his administration. We're going to go after individual ICE agents and personally, criminally prosecute them. We're going to destroy America. That's what this clown is saying. This is what you need to tell everyone. You need to share this with them. And here's just a little clip. Don't take my word for it.
I think on day one, they should make Puerto Rico, D.C. a state, and they should expand the Supreme Court to 13. Eat our dust. They've done everything they could. That they held up the 2000 election. They stole it. They've stolen Supreme Court seats. They've gerrymandered everything that you can, and the only way to fight this is don't run on it, don't talk about it, just do it.
Yeah, don't tell anybody about it. Don't run on it, just like that commie in Virginia who was a moderate, don't you know, until she won the governor's race because you let them win it in Virginia. And what are they doing now? She's raised your taxes on everything. She's going after your guns, and then we're going to talk about this bogus gerrymandering of their state districts in a couple segments here. But that's what they're talking about for all of America. So when I say to you, we must win in November, and if we do, we will win the war because the Democrat Marxist Communist Party will go the way of the Whigs because they won't be able to win anything. The other side is, if we don't win, you're done. You personally are done. Your wealth will be confiscated. You will be a slave in a communist country. And he's telling you that. So you've got to stand up and show people. Because here's the question you want to ask your Marxist, leftist, Democrat friends. How does anything he says, how does anything I said in that segment help you? How does impeaching Trump cut your taxes? How does impeaching Trump raise your wages? How does, getting rid of Trump's staff and going after spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars on a purge of patriots? How does that help you as a voter? It doesn't help you at all. All it does is give them power, not just over you and I, the conservatives, but over their slaves, the Democrats, the dumbass Marxists who are indoctrinated in their colleges. Ask them, what in that message from James Carville, how does giving Puerto Rico and D.C. statehood help you? Answer is, it doesn't. It screws you. It makes government bigger and raises your taxes. That's what it does. That's the message you've got to share. And so when they're doing that, when he's saying go scorched earth, and we're saying to the Republican Party, you've got to get rid of the filibuster. You've got to do the things, fix the election laws, do all that stuff. What did the Republicans do? Yeah, here's what the Republicans did. Republicans failed to attach Save America Act to party line funding package. That's what they did, okay? That's what they did this week. Republicans in the Senate did this. A cohort of Senate Republicans joined Democrats to sink a late-night attempt to attach a version of the voter ID and citizenship verification legislation to GOP's bill funding federal immigration enforcement. Senators Tom Tillis from North Carolina, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, Susan Collins from Maine, and Mitch McConnell from Kentucky all voted against the modified version of the Safeguarding America Voter Eligibility Act early Thursday morning. Their defections came during the Senate's marathon vote-a-rama, where lawmakers could force votes on any number of amendments, regardless of whether they mesh with the underlying budget blueprint. The amendments, 48-50 failure, crystallized what several Republicans had warned for weeks before launching a quasi-floor takeover to debate the Save America Act. It says they don't have the support among the GOP to pass the bill. Okay? Now, I don't understand why it was 48-50. All right, we lost. Who were the two senators that didn't vote? I don't know. It appears the proposal was doomed, even if Senate Majority Leader John Thune launched an oral filibuster to advance the measure with a simple 50-50 vote majority. I call BS on that because you know what I'm being told? I'm being told, Tillis is not running again. McConnell's not running again. Murkowski is a fraud. She's a damn Democrat. They stole the election in Alaska through the ranked choice voting commie plan, okay? She's a piece of garbage, all right? But what about Collins, who previously said she supported it, but she doesn't support this version of it, don't you know? Well, you know what? She's in a tough race. She's in a tough race for re-election in Maine, right? Here's the answer, because it was 48-50, lost. If it's 49-49, if she votes for it, guess who decides the vote? J.D. Vance. Here's the message to Susan Collins. We're going to give you not a dime. We're not going to support you for re-election. Because what does it matter? Who cares if the damn Dems win Maine? They got Lisa Murkowski now voting Dem. What do we care? See what she would have done if you took all her money away. Yeah. Did John Thune do that? No, they didn't. Who's the problem here? The Democrats or the Republicans? Remember, 85% of Americans support the Save America Act. Show a voter ID, prove you're an American citizen to register, show a legal ID to vote. 65% of Democrats support it. The Senate wouldn't pass it. Yeah, that's why we're in serious trouble, folks. And that's why I was very excited about this story that came out this week. Let me get my stuff together here. In a welcome move, DOJ brings in Joe DiGenova to oversee grand conspiracy probe in Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a huge story. I am so excited about this because we're finally getting the kind of fighters in the DOJ that we need. Pam Bondi is gone. Blanche, as you saw with the SPLC thing, is doing the job, right? He's a fighter. He defended Trump in the fake New York trials, right? He's an upgrade from Pam Bondi. Now they do this. Joe DiGenova, a former U.S. attorney under Reagan, will oversee the Spygate probe in Florida after the DOJ removed a deep state prosecutor who was stonewalling and slow-walking charges against John Brennan. The Justice Department on Friday removed Maria Menendez, a career federal prosecutor who was slow-walking charges against John Brennan. Former CIA John Rector is the target of the grand jury Russiagate probe in South Florida. Last July, it was reported that former FBI Director James Comey and Brennan were under FBI investigation over their involvement in Russiagate. CI Director John Ratcliffe referred Brennan and Comey for prosecution over the summer based on the evidence he had of their corrupt behavior in Russiagate. Okay, not just we're targeting our political opponents like the Biden and Obama administrations did. They broke the freaking law, and Ratcliffe referred them for prosecution, and no prosecution happened since last summer, right? So this woman was let go. U.S. Attorney Jason Redding Quinones is the Southern District of Florida attorney in charge of the investigation. On Friday, CNN reported that DOJ abruptly removed Maria Menendez for stonewalling the investigation. Let's see. Ms. Menendez on Friday was notified that she's not representing the people involved in the case, that she will no longer handle the investigation, and people with the matter said. She has led the politically sensitive probe for months, and amid demands from Trump to prosecute Brennan and other critics, the outlet reproved. CNN reported that the career prosecutors in South Florida are pushing back and claiming there isn't a strong enough case to bring charges against Brennan. The career prosecutors and investigators handling the case have for months pushed back against demands, CNN said. On Saturday, CS reported DOJ brought in DiGenova to oversee the Spygate probe. He will serve as a counselor to Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, according to CBS News. Now, I will tell you our organization's involvement with Joe DiGenova and his wife, Victoria Tunsing, is that when Donald Trump finally fired Jeff Sessions, who was a complete joke and should have never been a named attorney general when Trump won, he didn't win. When you and I gave everything we had to elect him in 2016, and then he appoints Sessions as attorney general, who then was just a joke. They finally fired him. I talked to Joe DiGenova and Victoria Tunsing and was asking if he would be interested in being attorney general. I tried to act through General Flynn and other sources to get Trump to appoint him attorney general. He would have been awesome. Instead, Rance Priebus and Pence and the deep state and the RINOs got Trump to appoint A.G. Barr. How'd that work out? Not too damn well. So I'm really excited that Joe DiGenova is now going to head up the Spygate probe because he knows where the bodies are buried. He's not afraid of the big players. He's going to make a real difference. And so I want to now go to a story that a lot of you are confused with because you're saying, well, geez, Tom, that's great. You just did this. And Trump was upset that there were no charges against Brennan. And so why did this story happen? Great news. D.C. subpoenas for Brennan grand jury testimony are withdrawn, replaced by requests for voluntary interviews. Why is that great news? That story's from our friend Sundance at the Conservative Treehouse, a great website, and the guy who has inside sources and always has a very unique take on things. So I wanted to share this story with you. Several people have inquired about the Washington, D.C. subpoenas for former CI Director John Brennan being withdrawn. And what does that mean? I intentionally did not write about it at the time because I wanted to look closely at the fact pattern. The DOJ is still planning to send requests for voluntary interviews and grand jury testimony, according to media reports. From my perspective, this is a good sign, potentially a very good sign. The issues around the CI targeting of President Trump are extensive. attached to numerous individuals and entities and generally complex. Normally, an investigation of this scope would begin with questions to the outer perimeter individuals who were carrying out the instructions of those above them. It is from those types of lower level of interviews that materials is gathered for use in examining the truthfulness of those who organized and directed their efforts. So these type of interviews are just as important as questioning Brennan himself, and for obvious reasons should come first. So right after they named Joe DiGenova, they withdraw the Brennan, grand jury, testimony request. And now they're going back to talking to the outer perimeter people. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the grand conspiracy is going to be dependent upon getting some of the smaller fish to indict the big fish. That's what's got to happen. And they weren't doing this, and that's where DiGenova understands how the fight is going. An example would be that they just released, Tulsi Gabbard just released this investigation into the CIA analysts in the Russia probe about the Ukraine phone call. And this Eric Churamilla guy, who was an anonymous whistleblower, but as I said last week, he was a CIA operative that said Trump, committed impeachable offenses on this call that he wasn't even on. Well, guess what? They're going to be talking to Eric Churamilla. And Mr. Churamilla's in big trouble. Big trouble, big prison time. And I think it should be worse. He thinks he's guilty of treason. Maybe as a former CIA operative, he could give us some insights. What do you think? That's the game that's being played. So, let's just be happy that things are starting to move. The SPLC thing, the Spygate, story last week, DiGenova coming into play. Lots of stuff is happening, and it's good. And you got to know about that, because all you're hearing is, no one's being arrested, no one's being prosecuted, nothing's being done. I believe that big things are going to happen in Florida, and DiGenova is going to be a big part of that. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock, and we've gone long for the first half, even though I've got some important stories to cover. So I'm going to take a break right now, and then we'll come back. This show is going to go beyond the 2 hours we normally do, because I know, looking at the stories we've got, but I hope you appreciated what you learned in the first half of the podcast, and you'll stick around for the second half, okay? So we're going to take a quick break. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski, and we'll be back after these messages.
When you're playing a video, including our podcast, you'll see this little cloud button. And if you click it, it'll actually download the video to your hard disk. And this works on our podcast page as well. If you're playing our podcast, and it's going to be loud, so I won't play it for much, but there's our podcast playing, and you can see this little, download button. Okay. The other thing you got to notice on our podcast page is that there's a link here where you can send me a message about this podcast. Hey, it was great. Hey, I didn't like it. Something was wrong, or here's a correction, that kind of thing. You can use that link. And then these are the stories that I covered in this particular podcast. And you'll see there's links that go to the stories, to the articles that I used in reporting on that. So you can click on that. You'll also see that you can sign up for our emails and text messages, but you can also watch our podcast on Roku TV and on Amazon Fire TV. And these are the instructions for doing that. So this is all on our podcast page, right on the front page where the yellow button was. So if you click there, this is our podcast page. These are the instructions for watching on Roku TV or Amazon Fire. And I watch our podcast on TV. It just feels more comfortable. So you can do that. We're also on Rumble. If you go to Rumble, you should join Rumble. And it's Tom Z at WTPC. You'll see our podcast there. So you can get us a lot of different ways, including on Apple iTunes. And then this is an audio version of our podcast. If you click here, it'll just play the audio of the podcast. It will not, show you the video.
so people can, listen to that while they're jogging or, working out, working in the yard, or just relaxing and just want to listen to the audio and not watch the video. And again, this is available on phone, on your iPad, on your laptop, on your computer, any way you want. And you can share this, whatever you see. If you're on a page that you really like, and you see an article that you think, geez, I've got to share this article, with someone in my family. You can send them an email by clicking on the little envelope. You can post it on Parler or MeWe. If you click on this, you get all kinds of options, where you can put it on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, which we don't support, but you can do whatever you want. So we ask that you share what you see on our We the People Convention site, and that you get more people to look at it, because that's the whole idea here, to help educate people, inform them. And then, as I said before, Link, we're not just about talk, we're about action. And in my podcast every week, which is published every Saturday, so if the new podcast usually comes out every Saturday, and in that podcast, I will ask you to do certain things that will help protect and defend your individual freedom, liberty, and prosperity. So that's the We the People Convention website. Come back often, use it to be informed, and share it with others. Thank you. The We the People Convention News and Opinion radio program is paid for by donors like you. You can donate to the We the People Convention and support our cause by going to wethepeopleconvention.org, or by sending your check in any amount to We the People Convention, P.O. Box 6211, Akron, Ohio 44312. All right, and we're back, and we're glad you're still with us, and we appreciate you, using the website to get information. We are in that video. It's older. We are on Facebook. We are on YouTube. We are on Gab, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, Roku. We're pretty much everywhere you want us to be. WeThePeopleConvention.org or WTPC. Tom Z WTPC is where we're at in social media. Tom Z WTPC. We're on Facebook at We the People Convention, and I have a personal page, Tom Zawistowski. So you can get us wherever you need to get us. Please share our information. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you again to those who donate. We greatly appreciate those dollars, because that's what's going to fuel our ability to fight. So thank you for that. Okay, now on with the show. Lots of other big things to cover. You got, this whole thing about the Virginia redistricting and this vote. And I give credit to the War Room with Steve Bannon and those guys. They rallied the troops and got the rural people out to vote. The problem was all the government workers in Fairfax County came out to vote, and it ended up being like a 51-49 type victory for the redistricting, meaning Virginia was probably the fairest state in the country. It was 6-5 Democrat. And now with the passage of this, they want it to be 10-1 Democrat. You know why, though? Because those Republicans redistricted Texas. But what Carville and the rest of them don't want to tell you is that they did this years ago. Why are there no Republican House members in all of New England? All of New England. And then they're going to say, the justification for making Virginia, California, is because Donald Trump instigated this in Texas. Yeah, horse hockey. That's garbage, okay? It's propaganda. You need to tell people it's propaganda. They started it, and they're pissed because we're finishing it. So here's some good news for you. Carswell judge says Virginia cannot certify redistricting referendum election results, okay? A Charwell County judge has declared that Virginia cannot certify the results of Tuesday's special election, during which voters approved a controversial proposal to redraw the state's congressional map due to several concerns about whether or not the effort is legal. According to the court documents obtained on Wednesday, April 22nd, Carville Judge Jack Hurley ruled the Virginia Democrats' efforts to redraw the state's congressional map mid-decade were illegal on multiple counts. He further declared Virginia cannot certify the results of the referendum and that legislators cannot take any action to implement a new map. It's on hold. You can't do it. He's the same judge that blocked the proposal not once, but twice leading up to it, and the Supreme Court decided not to hear it until after the election. Yeah, how nuts is that? So now the Supreme Court has to hear this. The redistricting proposal has been highly controversial since Governor Abigail Spanberg even signed the bill containing it into law. Under the proposed map, many Virginians will see their congressional district, which means they'd be represented by and able to vote for in the future a different number of Congress. 10 of Virginia's 11 congressional districts would favor Democrats at the ballot based on historical electoral data. They basically took Fairfax, Virginia, where all the government workers were, and extended these streams out of them into red districts so that they will be majority Democrat. That's what they did, okay? We hate this. We understand why this is happening, right? It's a war to rig the election. The Democrats have rigged them for years. As I said to you, how can they have 50% of the House and Senate seats when they got about 4% of the voters? It's because they've cheated by redistricting all along. And this is a way that they're trying to do it again, but this court may stop it. And oh, by the way, there was only this minor problem of like 35,000 votes in Fairfax, Virginia that just like disappeared. And Trump said, another stolen election. And I'm like, where's Harmeet Dillon and the DOJ and the FBI? Seize the machines in Fairfax. Let's prove once and for all how they cheat. Why are we doing that? You tell me, okay? But here's the bottom line. I don't think it's going to pass. I don't think they're going to get this. And here's a video with Ken Cuccinelli, who's the former Attorney General for Virginia, explaining why.
Ken Cuccinelli, he's a Republican. Ken, good to see you. So first, I guess let's get to the breaking news. This judge in Southern Virginia ordering results to not be certified. The judge called the ballot language flagrantly misleading. What's your reaction?
Right. Well, it certainly was flagrantly misleading, but my basic reaction is that I appreciate lower court wins, but the Virginia Supreme Court is going to decide this. And to Terry's point about, well, hey, if they didn't decide it before, there's a reason the Supreme Court held off until after the vote. Over 100 years of Virginia legal precedent says that the vote in a referendum is part of the legislative process. It's analogous to a governor signing a bill. You don't sue on a bill that hasn't passed yet. So what they've done here in terms of timing is very much in keeping with the Virginia legal history. What isn't in keeping with Virginia legal history is how this General Assembly has so blatantly ignored the requirements of the Constitution to amend the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So I think it's highly likely that this will be overturned probably in May.
So CNN's Manu Raju pressed Speaker Johnson today about some of the criticism from Republicans that the Republican Party, did not spend enough money to fight the Democratic measure. Take a listen.
Republicans have spent more money. Trump didn't barely touch his super PAC money. Should you guys have spent more money?
True. We don't know the final result, but the president's team spent a lot. We put in tens of millions of dollars on that ballot initiative.
I mean, given the fact that the margin was much more narrow than a lot of Democrats anticipated, what do you think? Did Republicans miss a chance here?
Well, there's no question that the 3 or 4 to 1 spending difference was the margin. You know, when all the votes are counted, this will be about a 2 or 3 point win for the yes side. That is, it's hard to say that money didn't make that difference, but now they have to win 4 constitutional challenges, state constitutional to clarify, challenges, and they have to win all 4 of them to hold on to this referendum. I just don't think they can do it. There's some very basic processes in the Constitution for amending the Constitution that they ignored. And now they're going to say, just like Terry did, well, 3 million people voted and you can't ignore the will of the people. Well, they were ignoring the will of the people and how they brought this forward. And now we're going to have it decided by the Virginia Supreme Court. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 7-0 ruling throwing this out.
All right.
So there you go. Yeah, Ken Cuccinelli is a smart man. He knows the law in Virginia for sure. He says it could be 7-0. Another thing for you to note, because again, what's propaganda, what's news? It is very important for you to understand that, as he said, the left outspent the Republicans like 3 or 4 to 1. Okay, big surprise there, right? And then it was much closer than the Democrats thought, because Spanberg won election by like 11% or something like that. And this only wins by 2 or 3%. And so this isn't a rebuke of Trump and of the Republicans. It's actually shows that the Dem support isn't as big as they think it is, even when they mislead you on the language and spend 4 times more money. Okay? Perspective. We talk all the time about perspective on this show, and that's why we do that. So then Ron DeSantis jumps in. Florida emerges as next redistricting battleground following Virginia vote. Okay? Ron DeSantis picks up the mantle and says, a renewed push to redraw a congressional district in Florida has moved to the forefront of national political attention following the recent redistricting outcome in Virginia, with state and national leaders signaling competing strategies ahead of upcoming midterm elections. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has initiated efforts to revisit the state's congressional map, calling for a special legislative session to consider revisions. The proposal comes amid broader national debate over how district boundaries should be drawn and how potentially large changes can influence future maps. Basically, what's going on is that when Trump said Texas and the rest of these states should act, and Missouri has acted, and there's some other states, and then California, they had their referendum and they stole 5 seats, and now they're trying to steal 4 more in Virginia. Even if Virginia succeeds, the number of Republican versus Democrat House seats nationally is about the same as it was when they started. So now, if DeSantis jumps in the fray and adds a couple seats, and remember, if you change 2 seats in Florida, it's 4 seats difference. And when you got a House, a House majority of like 4 votes, 4 more seats makes a big difference. Okay, the Thomas Masseys can't do as much damage as they're doing. So this is a big deal. So Florida is going to move forward with this. And, and Hakeem Jeffries threatened and said, go ahead and try it, DeSantis. I'll come to Florida and we'll fight you. And he said, come on down. I'll put you up in the governor's mansion, because I would love to see you in Florida, because our people are not going to respond to your message. You're going to help us get more Republican seats. So this is the fight, again, for November. They know they've got to win. We know we've got to win. What are you willing to do? We saw what they're willing to do in Virginia. They're willing to lie, cheat, and steal. Ron DeSantis is saying, well, yeah, you want to fight fire with fire? We'll fight fire with fire. Let's go. Now, again, if they lose the Supreme Court case in Virginia and DeSantis does this, that's a huge plus for us. That's like 7 seats from Republican to Democrat, which is 14. And that's just the beginning. And why do I say that's just the beginning? Because I keep telling you about the other things that are in play that we win the war in November. And we win the war by getting rid of the dead people, the illegal people, okay, and making sure that Debs can't win. So Mississippi governor, I get up this morning, Mississippi's governor basically says, I'm putting forward a directive that our legislature will come into session to vote on redistricting Mississippi 21 days after the Supreme Court announces its decision with this Calise case. This is the case where the Supreme Court, I've told you, the Supreme Court is looking at these racially gerrymandered districts as unconstitutional. It could change as many as 14 seats, which again would be 28 seats, which would again mean the Dems could never win Congress again. Understand? Mississippi's already gearing up because they expect that decision is going to come out by June, and they're going to implement it by November. So Florida's acting, Mississippi's acting, all that's good news. You've got to fight to win, unlike the current Republicans in the Senate who don't want America to win. They like it just the way it is. They like the fraud. They like what's going on. And further, in the House, just a couple more things about the House, because I said, what's the margin? Well, Democrat Sheely Shefferlis McCormick resigns from Congress in face of expulsion vote. Florida Congresswoman Sheila Shefferlis McCormick resigned from Congress on Tuesday amid allegations of financial misconduct that could have led to her expulsion later in the week. She stole $5 million of COVID funds and used it to run her election. She's going to prison. She's an embezzler, okay? The stunning announcement came just moments before the House Ethics Committee was scheduled to stage a public hearing to weigh potential penalties. And the Democrats did not want that hearing out there in public because they don't want people to know what sleazebags they are. That's why you got to share that story with your friends so they know what sleazebags they are. And then to make it even worse for the damn Dems, Georgia Democrat Rep. David Scott, at age 80, passed away surprisingly. So he basically just drops dead. Representative David Scott of Georgia has died at age 80, basically his death was disclosed at a committee hearing on Wednesday to a number of lawmakers. He was first elected in 1974. He's a 12-term lawmaker. Scott's death leaves the Congress at 218 Republicans and 212 Democrats. So that's a 6-vote margin. It used to be only 4, and then when we had some people thrown out, it was like 1 or 2. Okay, now it's 6 momentarily. Let's see. With 5 vacancies, people have resigned or died. Brian Kemp, a Republican for Georgia, will have 10 days to call a special election to fill the vacancy in the deep blue seat. This is good for us. It's a good time for us to act, and Johnson gets a little breathing room. But man, it's just, as I said to you, how do we win the war? I'll say it to you again. Multiple things. Harmeet Dillon is trying to use the Supreme Court to force all the states to turn over their voter rolls so we can get the dead people and the illegals off them. You do that, it's game, set, match. You will see a drop in voting in California in the tens of millions, okay? They're going to vote. Supreme Court is going to vote. Election day is election day. No more ballots coming in until you win. No more ballots coming in until you win. That's the left strategy. They've done it. It's a fact. That's going to end. Then the racial gerrymandering, right? That's going to end. And those seats are going to switch. Then no ICE at the polls. Let's make sure, President Trump, we got ICE agents all over the polling locations in blue states. Let's see how that works out, okay? Let's see how that works out. And then you and I got to get our people out to vote to save our country. That's how we defeat the left and make them go the way of the Whigs and never come back again. Okay? And oh yeah, by the way, probably should pass a SAVE Act. Okay. Moving on to a couple international stories and then back to other things that are, domestic. This was bizarre. DOJ charges 2 Chinese nationals who allegedly ran overseas scam centers targeting Americans. The scope of this thing is nuts. The Department of Justice has announced that its scam center strike force has filed criminal charges and issued arrest warrants against 2 Chinese nationals who are operating a cryptocurrency investment fraud operation in Burma. The strike, and trying to start another one in Cambodia. The strike force also seized a Telegram app channel that used the promise of non-existent jobs to lure unsuspecting job seekers to its compound in Burma, where they would enslave them. Okay? Along with 503 fake investment websites. According to the Department of Justice statement, the strike force unsealed arrest warrants against, and I can't pronounce their names, two Chinese guys, in connection with the cryptocurrency investment fraud operation in Burma. They are charged with wire fraud conspiracy, according to the statement. They are being held in Cambodia on immigration charges and are trying to be Attorney General Jean Pirro, U.S. Attorney Jean Pirro from D.C. is trying to get them extradited. Hong and Zheng are accused of managing the Shundai compound from which officials took 8,000 cell phones, 1,500 computers, and a very large, sophisticated operation. These places are cities, essentially, where you have enslaved labor that's been trafficked, that's been conned themselves into going into, they think, a legitimate job, and then they end up being enslaved. In one scheme, scammers posing as bankers called individuals and told them their bank accounts had been used to buy guns from a U.S. gun store or website. That was real. Victims were then transferred to another person posing as a New York police detective or other law enforcement agents. Eventually, victims were connected with fake court officials and convinced to disclose bank account information and transfer money to the scammers. The shooting compound reportedly operated between January 25 and November 25. Compound operators also used sham websites, social media, and mobile applications masquerading as legitimate investments to lure in its victims. Wow. That's the kind of stuff that we're fighting. That's the kind of stuff we need to be fighting, right? I mean, that's the bottom line. What is our government doing for us, the American people? They were preying on Americans, and that's great to see that we're getting some protection from these amazing scams. This story I probably should have mentioned earlier during the Iran war segment, but it's not insignificant. Trump announced that Israel and Lebanon have extended their ceasefire for 3 weeks. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. Because I said to you, we've got to get Hamas out of, Hezbollah, out of Lebanon, because they are occupiers. They're Iranian-controlled occupiers. If Lebanon's ever going to be a free country, we've got to expel them. Israel and the government of Lebanon are talking to each other, and the U.S. is going to help with that. Okay? So 3-week extension, I like it. That's a good thing. This was interesting. In the middle of the war, Trump fired his Navy secretary. What led to Navy Secretary John Phelan losing his job? Here's what we know. So this is kind of like, whoa, the Army guy got fired a couple weeks ago, and now the Navy guy gets fired. Navy Secretary John Phelan was out of a job on Wednesday, as reporting indicates that President Donald Trump wanted to change, citing slow shipbuilding times in the midst of the Iran war and a blockaded maritime shipping channel. Phelan's exit was made public by the Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell, who said Wednesday in an X post the secretary and former businessman was departing the administration effective immediately. And so the guy was gone, like right now. It was a short tenure. He was actually appointed by Trump in 2024, and he had no military experience. He was a businessman. Prior to being confirmed, Phelan was a big Trump and GOP donor. Federal Election Commission records showed that during Trump's 2024 campaign, Phelan donated $834,600 to the now president's joint fundraising committee. He donated another $93,000 on November 10th, 2024, days after Trump's big victory. I guess that didn't buy him much influence with Trump, did it? So they have, appointed a Navy Undersecretary, Hung Kao, a combat veteran with over 25 years experience, as the now acting secretary. And I remember this guy, and I played his video for you when he ran for Senate and he lost, I think in Virginia. This is a quick video of him because I love this guy's passion and I love his message to Americans.
Gentlemen, we came to this country with nothing. We asked nothing from this country. And I always tell people, don't come to this country and ask for the American dream if you're not willing to obey the American laws and embrace the American culture. And together, we will make this America great again. Thank you so much.
This is the scariest sound you will hear when you live in a communist country. This is the last sound my parents heard when their fathers were taken away in the middle of the night, and they never saw their loved ones again. That's the sound of losing your freedom, the sound of always living in fear. That's my family's real life story. We escaped from Vietnam just days before Saigon fell to the communists. We were given a new life in the most generous country on earth. America saved my life. I graduated from the United States Naval Academy. I earned a master's in physics and fellowships at MIT and Harvard. before the left replaced merit with racial quotas. I spent my life trying to repay my debt to America, my country, our country, with 25 years of service in Navy Special Operations, combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia. But now our country has taken a dark turn. That's Joe Biden's Justice Department sending 24 armed agents to arrest a pro-life activist in front of his family. That's Joe Biden's IRS raiding a gun shop and seizing thousands of records from law-abiding gun owners. Our names, our addresses, our social security numbers. That's Joe Biden arresting his challenger in the next election, a former president of the United States. And now a different sound. That's the sound of someone breaking into your home or business. The sound of crime destroying our cities and communities. That's how it all starts. They let criminals back on our streets. Millions of illegal immigrants pour across our border each year, including military-aged men from all over the world. And enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in this country. And the Biden family? Well, that's how it works in a dictatorship. The rules don't apply to the rulers. We are losing our country. You know it, but you also know you can't say it. We're forced to say that wrong is right. We're forced to lie. We can't let that happen.
Can't let that happen, and he's not letting that happen. Would you want that guy to be the head charge of the Navy? You think he might do a good job? You think he might be a good ally to General Raisin Kane and Pete Hegseth? Yeah. I'll post that video too so you can share that with people. Those are the kind of people we want to immigrate to the United States. That's what we need to do. But that's not what we're getting. That's what we didn't get under the commies and under Joe Biden. So this story was interesting. New York loses nearly $74 million for not revoking commercial driver's license unlawfully issued to foreigners. They're not foreigners. They're illegals. A federal audit shows more than half of the trucking licenses issued to foreigners in the state were granted illegally. In New York State, half of the driver's license. And these are the clowns, these are the illegals who are killing families in their minivans when their tractor trailer rams into them. Okay? The U.S. Department of Transportation withholds $73.5 million in federal funding for New York for failing to revoke illegally issued commercial driver's license, learner's permits, and licenses to foreign nationals. I promised the American people I would hold any state leader accountable for failing to keep them safe from unvetted, unqualified foreign drivers, Sean Duffy said. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said, my message to New York's far-left leadership is clear. Families must be prioritized on American roads. Okay? The audit performed last year by the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration within the Transportation Department found that more than half of New York's commercial driver licenses were issued to non-domiciled drivers. Okay? So what does New York do? New York sues. They sue. They want to keep doing it. They want to keep doing it. Following the audit, they notified the state that it failed to complete required corrective action, including the immediate revocation of all illegal issued drivers, commercial driver license and permits. The state allegedly refused to remove the drivers from the road, prompting the agency to issue the final determination. The funds represent 4% of New York's National Highway Performance Program and Surface Transportation Block Grants programs, according to the Transportation Department. Withholding 4% isn't enough. You need to take it all away. This is insanity. This is insanity, but that's the left doesn't care. They want to kill you. They want to damage your society. That's what they're doing. There's your proof. But we're not backing down. We're not stopping. And oh yeah, I mentioned before how the news isn't the news and how you don't know things. Oh yeah, guess what happened now? ICE Houston arrests 277 illegal immigrants in 2 weeks. The arrests were made as the Houston City Council voted to curtail local law enforcement cooperation with ICE. We don't care. We're not going to stop. Tom Homan's coming for you, whether you like it or not. Immigration and Customs Enforcement's Houston office recently arrested 277 illegal immigrants who have been convicted of 751 crimes. 751 crimes. Who are those crimes against? Houston? Your city council? Your mayor? Who do you think are the victims of those 751 crimes? But no, you think the victims are the 277 illegals, right? No, that's not the truth. The arrests made between April 6th and April 17th include 17 child predators, 6 murderers, 16 drug traffickers, 15 gang members or associates, 67 robbers, 2 foreign fugitives wanted for murder, 11 aliens convicted of hit and run, ICE said in an April 22nd statement, adding that the 277 criminals altogether entered the United States illegally 654 times. They were thrown out and came back, thrown out and came back because the left had a revolving door at the border, don't you know? And this is why. So they can have these people come in and hurt you. But we're not letting them. Donald Trump's not letting them. Tom Homan's not letting them. And that's awesome. You know this is awesome? Law requiring ICE agents to show identification struck down by the Ninth Circuit Court. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals slapped down California law that would have forced immigration agents and other law enforcement officers to display ID while on duty, with a ruling Wednesday finding that the measure attempts to directly regulate the federal government. The law purports to override the federal government's power to determine whether, how, and when to publicly identify its officers, wrote Judge Mark J. Bennett. The Supremacy Clause forbids the state from enforcing such litigation. Why did they want that law? Why did the left communists that run California, who stole California with illegal votes, okay, why did they want this law? So they could target, dox the ICE agents and other police officers and destroy them and their families. So they could, what? Protect illegals. Protect the invasion that they brought into this country to do what? Destroy us so that China could rule over us, to destroy us from within. We're fighting back. You should know about it. You should tell other people about it. It's awesome. This is also awesome. I'm using awesome a lot here. Well, it is awesome. Dr. Oz says anti-fraud efforts coming to all 50 states. We're asking the states to own that problem, red and blue, all of them. Absolutely right. If you think the government fraud is only happening in blue states, you're dead wrong. Oh, they're the experts at it. But don't you doubt that it's happening all over red states. It's happening in your community. It's happening in your township and your counties and your cities. Because none of these programs are legitimate. They're money laundering. They're taking money from hardworking Americans and giving it to their friends and the people they want to bribe to vote for them. That's what this is. It's not compassion. We have been lied to. We have been hoodwinked for your and my entire lives. And I'm going to be 71 years old in July. Dr. Mehmet Oz, the administrator of the agency overseeing Medicaid and Medicare, announced Tuesday that his agency's anti-fraud effort will come to every state. During an interview at a Politico-hosted event, Oz said that every U.S. state can expect anti-fraud activities involving funds received through the Center for Medicare and Medicine. We're going to announce this week that all 50 states are going to be requested to give us a plan over the next 30 days of how they're going to revalidate providers in high-risk areas in their states. Oz explained that it would involve providing whether providers for these programs really exist or not, knock on their door, go see if there's kids in the classroom, go see if they're really autistic, go see if they're seniors, okay? And whether or not they have a right to provide these services to them. He's going to make an audit. Really? What an idea. He must be a genius as we give away trillions of dollars with no accountability. Because you know why? That's a good way to do it if you're trying to steal it. And that's what Congress allows them to do. Because Congress is stealing the money. Your congressman, my congressman, Republicans and Democrats, your whole life, they've been stealing us blind and then telling us that that's our fault. And we just can't do it. We got to raise your taxes. You got to work harder, don't you know? You got to work harder. Yeah, so we're seeing action, and that's what we need to see. And again, I said to you last week, and I'm going to say it with this story again. What I'm loving is it's not just we're identifying fraud, but now we're trying to recover it. We're starting to get some money. So this story came out. USDA cuts off 1,562 retailers suspected of facilitating SNAP fraud. And my sign says, we accept EBT. And I said, now you don't. All right. I put this story out to you for your emails this week for you to share. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Food and Nutrition Service has disqualified 1,562 realtors retailers associated with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program and disabled 760 illegal point-of-sale devices since October 2025. This has resulted in the prevention of nearly 835 million in fraudulent SNAP transactions. Stephen Vaden, Deputy Secretary of the Department of Agriculture, said on an X post, "Commit fraud, we'll find you and hold you accountable, including jail time." And now we have the whole government under the leadership of the Vice President and A. Ferguson, FTC, rooting out abuse of any program meant to help the most vulnerable, Vaden wrote, referring to Vice President J.D. Vance and Federal Trade Commission Chairman Andrew Ferguson. Responding to the post, Ferguson said, "More is coming." That's what you and I voted for. More is coming. Fraud by SNAP retailers can involve selling items not allowed in the program, exchanging SNAP benefits for cash, and lying on their application to get authorization to participate as a retailer. Such retailers can face permanent or temporary disqualification from the program, denial of the application, etc. One grocer in Palos Hills, Indiana, was permanently disqualified from SNAP after racking up more than $6 million in fraudulent transactions under the program, Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins said in an April 10th X post. In another incident, an owner of a small convenience store in Boston was convicted for trafficking almost $7 million in SNAP benefits, outpacing even full-size supermarkets. Okay? We're on it. We're working on it. I told you, fraud is going to be one of the biggest issues in the November election. Many people you know who might not vote in November will turn out to vote when they hear about all this fraud, which is why you need to share this. Because like I told you before, the fraud affects all of them. It's their money, right? When they're doing the ICE raids and stuff, ICE wasn't in my town. They weren't raiding people I knew. You know, it's important. I cared about it, but it wasn't personal. When you steal $9 billion, that's personal because some of that's my money and you got to share it. So here's a video clip from Jesse Waters, who's kind of expanded upon my theme that I shared with you a couple podcasts ago, that quite frankly, our federal budget should be like $2 trillion and all the rest of it is fraud. All of it. Every social program we created to supposedly help the needy isn't helping the needy. It's helping to overthrow our nation and get rid of Western civilization. Here's what Jesse had to say. He was pretty animated.
Michael Steele, black man, doesn't care that the group sent $1 million to the neo-Nazis? They paid the Grand Wizard. He doesn't care. They also don't care that the group committed bank fraud, wire fraud, and defrauded all their donors. Don't care. As long as they smeared Republicans. Doesn't matter. The ends justify the means. I'm beginning to think the entire Democratic Party is a whole scam. What is it really about? Stealing money, flooding the country with illegals, and calling us racists. That's it. Every time you look under the hood, all you find are scams. COVID. Wait a second. Fauci funded the lab where the virus came from? Whoa! Somali daycare, $19 billion. Wait a second, there's no children in the daycare center. What happened to USAID? None of the money left D.C. It all went to Democrats there. Everything, Russia, Hunter, whatever happened to the Green New Deal? It was about $1 trillion, right? Where are the windmills? Where are the solar panels? Where'd they go? I haven't seen anything. They haven't even built the little charging stations for the EVs. Where did it go? How about Omar? Omar, the other day, was worth $100,000. Next month, she was worth $30 million. Then she went back down to $100,000. How does that happen? They put Donald Trump on trial because of a bookkeeping thing. And she just gets away with inflating and deflating her net worth. Maybe she's hiding the money. Maybe there was never any money. Here's the point. You can't pay racists and then raise money off racism. And it all started 10 years ago in 2014 when they started incubating the nation with racism. You saw it all over television, all over the newspapers. Race, race. Remember the syrup? Remember the songs? We used to do stories on the 5 all day long. And it crushed the heart and soul of the country. Everyone was afraid. People were getting canceled. You couldn't say what you wanted to say. And then what did it turn out to be? a big fat psyop. And it turns out we all love each other. And they don't want us to love each other. But we do anyway. We love you.
Yeah, well said, Jesse. We love each other. We love America. That's who we are. We're not the psyop image that they created of America. It's all a lie. It's all a lie. You got to make sure your friends see that video so they know it's a lie. Okay? The Democrats are communists. Their job is to destroy America. The lie is over because you and I and Donald Trump exposed it. Keep going. Keep going. So we talked a lot about fraud and all that stuff. So this story is, you'll understand what this is about. DOJ ends investigation of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Okay? So the Federal Reserve was going to build a new building in Washington. The budget was like $1.5 million. I think it was $1.5 billion. Okay? And then it just kept going up and up, and it's like $3.5 billion. And Trump was mad at Powell because he was acting politically. He wasn't changing rates. He tried to help Joe Biden get elected. The Fed chair acted politically. So Trump's been at war with them. And then Jeanine Pirro filed and ended its criminal investigation of Reserve Chair Powell because she filed charges to find and get them to give us the data. Why did this overrun happen? Where'd the money go? How can this building cost this much money, right? Well, Powell was saying, it's just Trump trying to pressure me to lower interest rates. And so Tom Tillis, the traitor from North Carolina, right, who you guys never should have been elected as a senator, for God's sake, the guy who wouldn't vote for the SAVE Act, he's holding up the new Fed chair unless Trump dropped charges against Powell, right? Those are, right? When I say the problems with the RINOs, as much as the Democrats, Tom Tillis is your poster child, folks. Tom Tillis would not let the new Fed chairman come in because he's going to actually be fair about the interest rate. He testified at the Senate or the House or wherever he testified this week saying, I'm not going to be a puppet of the president, but I'm going to do the right things, okay? Unlike the guy who's currently got the job. So, they're going to, again, hold him to a standard, but not Jerome Powell. But Tom Tillis wasn't going to let him be voted on unless they did this. So they did it. So, again, the evil side wins one. Tom Tillis wins this one. But the longer story is we got to get this guy to be the Fed chair. And so we're for it, right? We're for that move by the Trump administration. Sometimes you got to take a hit, to better advance your cause. This is another hit we have to observe. Tariff refunds in sight as importers start signing up. So remember, the Supreme Court ruled, we think wrongly, that Trump's tariffs, they were legal. You just did them the wrong way. Now we have to give back, we the taxpayers have to give back $166 billion to people who paid the tariffs. Importers are inching closer to receiving tariff refunds this week as companies began to work through the government's newly launched system. It enables companies to formally request their piece of the $166 billion in collected duties invalidated by the Supreme Court. Still, the Trump administration warns it may be weeks before the funds actually change hands. So they set up this website, and they can go and ask for it, and we have to pay it back. Now, the $166 billion is not all the tariffs, okay? There's hundreds of billions more, like 300 or 400 billion more in tariffs if you do them the right way, according to the Supreme Court, all right? But again, I don't think that's a good thing, that we have to spend our time and money giving those back. This was a good decision by the court. Court unanimously sides with oil and gas companies and sued over damage to Louisiana coast. I mean, this is going to just blow your mind. This is just crazy. So the Supreme Court on Friday sent a lawsuit seeking to hold oil and gas companies liable for damages to the Louisiana coast back to the federal courts. Several Louisiana parishes, which are counties in other states, the equivalent of counties, have filed the lawsuit in state court. And in 2024, a federal appeals court in New Orleans rebuffed the company's latest efforts to move the case to federal court. But a vote of 8-0 in Chevron USA versus this parish in Louisiana, Justice Samuel Alito did not participate because he owned stock in one of the companies. The justices on Friday morning threw out the appeals court decision. The federal law at the center of the case is known as Federal Office Removal Statute. It gives federal courts the power to hear state cases, court cases filed against any officer or person under that officer of the United States or the agency thereof. Anyway, that's all mumbo jumbo. Here's the bottom line. More than a decade ago, these parishes, along with state officials, filed lawsuits in state court against oil and gas companies whose predecessors, not these companies, but the companies they bought out years ago, had produced crude oil along the Louisiana coast during World War II. They argued that the companies had violated state environmental laws by either failing to obtain the proper permits or violating the terms of any permits that they did obtain. Moreover, they claimed the company's activities before 1980 were not covered by the law's prior clauses protecting them. This is a lawsuit about damage to the coast during World War II. I'm glad the Supreme Court said, no, stop this. Stop this. I'm guaranteeing you, this is being funded by left wings, you like the Sierra Club or whatever, to do what? To damage our oil companies. That's the whole goal. Destroy capitalism. That's what it's about. Okay? This story I shared with you guys via text and email because I was surprised by it. In a surprising and amazing move, Trump signs EO opening access to psychedelic drugs. This was last Saturday before the podcast, and this press conference came on, and I said, man, what's Trump signing? And we look closer, and it's something about psychedelic drugs. And there's Joe Rogan, who I know is a big proponent of, eating mushrooms and things for hallucinogens. And he's standing right behind President Trump. And I'm like, what the heck is this about? So I researched it, and I sent it to you. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on April 18th that will establish a pathway that gives people with mental illnesses access to psychedelic drugs, including the ibogaine compounds. The executive order signed on Saturday morning aimed to accelerate research and approval of psychedelic drugs that could save lives and help reverse the mental illness plaguing America, according to the order. It's for a lot of people, but it's for our military in particular, Trump said. The suicide epidemic among veterans is a national tragedy. Ibogaine, a plant-based psychoactive compound, safely led to improvements in depression, anxiety, and functioning among veterans with traumatic brain injuries, according to a 2024 study by Stanford Medical Research. Thousands of veterans are having to travel to Mexico or other countries to experiment with interventions that hold great promise, but for which our knowledge is still insufficient, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy said at the White House. This executive order will remove the legal impediments that blocked American researchers, scientists, physicians, and clinicians from properly studying these medicines. Comedian and broadcaster Joe Rogan sent Trump a text message, and then Trump acted on it, and that's what was so surprising to this. I would just want to read this to you. I wasn't sure what this was about when I saw it this morning. I know Joe Rogan has been a big proponent of these drugs, but what happened was amazing. He said he sent a text to President Trump, and he said, I sent him the information, and the text message came back, sounds great. Do you want FDA approval? Let's do it, Rogan said while at the signing of the order on Saturday. It was literally that quick. These drugs are illegal not because they're harmful. They're illegal because of a 1970 Controlled Substance Act. According to research published in the National Library of Medicine, 80% of the people who went to Mexico between 2012 and 2015 for ibogaine treatments said it eliminated or drastically reduced withdrawal symptoms from opioids. The data noted that very few studies have reported the effectiveness of ibogaine on treatment of chronic opioid use. The Department of Human Health Services will allocate at least $50 million from existing funds to work with states that have developed or are developing programs to advance psychedelic drugs for serious mental illness. Okay? So I think this is a good thing, though I don't know much about it. But then I came across this video from Dr. Markey, who was in that picture with Trump and stuff like that. I had no idea what's been happening to our veterans. I had no idea. I think you're going to be shocked by these numbers, and it's a shame. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning of the podcast about the real news not being covered, because man, oh man, this should have been covered. Listen to what he has to say.
We have a mental health crisis, and some of these conditions, we don't have good treatments. And so what President Trump did is we sent a strong message that this administration is going to prioritize mental illness in this country. We're going to look at alternative new approaches. We're going to use the scientific process, but this is the right time to send that message because the clinical studies have matured now and they've read out, and those applications are about to come to the FDA. So we're sending a strong message that this is a priority because we've lost more veterans since the Iraq War than during the Iraq War. As a matter of fact, more than died in the Iraq War and Afghan wars combined. We've lost over 30,000 veterans from suicide. So we owe it to them. For many of these soldiers, people in the military, they signed up to serve in the military. The war ended, yet our men and women are still dying. So we owe it to them.
Wow. 30,000 dead by suicide, more than were killed by the enemy in the war. Yeah, you think this was a necessary move? How much credit should you give to President Trump? Again, acting at the speed of Trump. He gets a text from Joe Rogan, and like a week later, it's done. Holy moly. And now people who criticize Trump, he's mentally incompetent or whatever. Shut up. Wow. Thank God we're moving in this direction. Kudos to Joe Rogan for, taking a chance, reaching out, fighting for these veterans. Man, that's a big story. I want you to share that video. That's awesome. This is, I don't know if this is going to be awesome or not, but it's coming. Trump says first release of UFO documents will begin very, very soon. This is something people have been asking for forever. President Trump announced on April 17th he expects his administration to begin releasing documents very soon related to extraterrestrial life and unexplained phenomena. As you remember, I recently directed the Secretary of War to begin releasing government files relating to UFOs and unexplained aerial phenomena, Trump told an audience in Phoenix. I'm pleased to report today that this process is well underway, and we found many, many very interesting documents, I must say. And the first release will begin very, very soon. Trump made the remarks at an event with Turning Point Action in Phoenix this past week. So that's good stuff. The U.S. government holds thousands of documents related to historical reports about the subject of unidentified flying objects and alien phenomena, including more than 12,600 reports from Project Blue Book, which took place from 1947 to 1969. The public can already access some of the public records, photos, and sounds at the National Archives. But the buzz over more evidence comes days after Artemis II made its historic voyage around the moon, stirring the public's interest in space discovery once again. We'll see what's in the documents. I don't know if there'll be anything that makes a difference or not. This is what I voted for. I don't know if you voted for this. You may be a little squeamish about this, particularly based on your religious beliefs. This is long overdue. Biden commuted death sentences. Trump's DOJ is bringing back the firing squad. Hear, hear. The whole scam about, injecting them with chemicals to give people who are sentenced to death, to make them die was inhumane. But what they did to the people they murdered, mass murdered, that's okay that they did that. But boy, you're going to inject them, with some chemical, and how dare you? And so we're going to stop this, right? No. Let's do it. Firing squad, a bullet. The guy that shot Charlie Kirk after he's convicted, I'd like to have him shot with the gun he shot Charlie Kirk. I will shoot him. I'll be happy to be the one that shoots him with his own gun for killing Charlie Kirk, because that man's evil and he deserves to die immediately. That may make some of you uncomfortable. That's the way I feel. President Donald Trump's Department of Justice on Friday directed the Bureau of Prisons to bring back the firing squad and lethal injection for federal executions. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche announced a series of new measures to strengthen enforcement of the federal death penalty, clearing the way for the DOJ to carry out executions once inmates exhaust their appeals. Way too many appeals. Way too many appeals. Among the actions taken are readopting the lethal injection protocol utilized during the first Trump administration, expanding the protocol to include additional manners of execution, such as firing a squad, and streamlining internal processes for expediting death penalty cases. Hear, hear. That's what I voted for. These steps are critical to deterring the most barbaric crimes, delivering justice for victims, and providing long overdue closure to surviving loved ones. The directive fulfills a campaign promise from Trump, who on his first day back in office ordered the Attorney General to pursue the death penalty for all crimes of severity demanding its use. The policy marks a reversal from the Biden administration handling the federal executions. In 2021, former President Joe Biden imposed an indefinite moratorium, effectively blocking all federal executions. December 2024, he commuted the sentences of 37 of 40 inmates on federal death row at the urging of then Attorney General Merrick Garland. Another POS. Okay? They murdered your family, and we put them up in prison for life and let them read books and just enjoy our food. That ain't justice. That ain't justice. Justice should be swift. Just like the death that they was swift of your loved ones. It's disgusting. This is another great thing. This is what I voted for. And again, this is news you should know. Washington, D.C. now has the highest unemployment rate in the country at 6.9%. Yay! All those years where you and I had the highest unemployment rates in the country. Out here in the heartland, all those people in D.C. had all the money and all the jobs, and they didn't give a damn about you. President Trump said he's going to change that. Here's the evidence. Yesterday, I read a New York Times column describing how professional political employees and their families have been impacted by President Trump and the downsizing of federal workers. The New York Times tried to write this piece of, you should be sorry for them. Oh, they're suffering so much. Shut up. Yeah, amid the tear-filled typeset meant to generate sympathy, this part jumped out at me. The District of Columbia currently has the highest unemployment rate in the nation at 6.7%, in large part because of major reductions in the federal workforce, including U.S. aid and cuts to government grants and contracts. Almost all of the $35 billion spent by USAID in 2024 went to Washington-based contractors, not to people in need overseas. Eliminating U.S. aid has now created an unemployment problem for all those D.C.-based federal contractors, NGOs, and USAID employees. The New York Times article gives examples of the terrible state of affairs. Here's one. Cheryl Cohen, 57, was making $272,000 a year as a senior vice president at a USAID-funded nonprofit, where she was let go at the end of March 2025. Last month, she had an online interview for a $19 an hour job managing a Penzi spices store near her home in Falls Church, Virginia. Her take-home pay could not cover her mortgage, but she said she was eager to do something other than spending down her savings and has applied for 60 jobs. She has since been called back for an in-person interview. Aside from the salary, it would be fun. I could do it for a little while, working for $19 an hour, she said. Mrs. Cowan above, pictured above, was making $23,000 a month was her pay for years for the nonprofit funded by USAID. Okay? I saw one of the best responses to the situation outlined after the story from comments. The framing wants you to feel outraged at the cruelty of the cuts, but the actual data point buried in the story is devastating to the narrative it's trying to build. $272,000 for a senior VP at a U.S.-funded nonprofit is not a real salary. It's a subsidy. That job existed inside a closed-loop, taxpayer-funded effort. USAID funds, NGOs, NGOs hire professionals at inflated rates. Those professionals build lives around compensation, was never stress tested against the open market. The entire salary was a function of proximity to the spigot, not output, not value creation, not demand for her specific skills. The $19 an hour number isn't the system being cruel, it's a system being honest for the first time. The market is saying, without the government funding system, your skills at age 57 command $39,000 a year, not $272,000 a year. That's a great response. That's a great response. And cry me a river, okay? She's making $272,000 a year. How much stock do you think she owns? She's got to have, if she had the job for even 4 or 5 years, her stock portfolio's got to be worth at least $500,000 to $1 million. Cry me a river, you thief. Here's the problem. I don't want her just fired. I want the money back. I want to go after her personally. Because what was she doing at USAID? Was she helping the Southern Poverty Law Center? Was she overthrowing the U.S. government? Was she a traitor? I want to know that. You should want to know that. Yeah, James Carville, F it. Just do it. Let's get to the bottom of this. I want her money back. Then she can cry real tears. Okay, going to wrap up the podcast. Just mention a couple things. I posted Trump's full speech at Turning Point Phoenix. That happened last week because, again, it didn't get enough coverage. He talked about the economy, okay, and he talked about the UFO things, and it's on our website at wethepeopleconvention.org in the video section. It's only about an hour-long speech. It's worth listening to. Got no coverage at all. President of the United States speaking gets no coverage. Love it, okay? I do want to remind you about making plans to celebrate our 250th anniversary. Happy birthday, America. How are you going to celebrate all that we the people have achieved? It's our birthday. We did this. We built this country. Our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our ancestors. This is the year we celebrate. And the best way to celebrate would be to win the election in November and send the Democrat communists the way of the Whigs. It can happen, folks. It can happen. So do what I said at the beginning of the podcast, because we're being censored. We're being shut down. Tell people about this podcast. Share it with them. Go to our podcast page and look at the stories. Use our chapters player where you can go just to the story you haven't heard about and watch that part of the podcast. Send me ideas for stories at info@wethepeopleconvention.org. info@wethepeopleconvention.org. Write to me and tell me where I'm wrong. Write to me and correct me if I said something that was inaccurate. We are about the truth. I cannot lie to you. I cannot lie to myself. I cannot lie to my wife. I cannot lie to my kids. I cannot lie to my community. You can't live lies. Unfortunately, the left only wants to live lies. That's their game. That's the propaganda. You come here from truth. You come here to get truth. It's up to you to make sure I'm giving you the truth. And if I don't, and you can prove it, I'll admit it the next week and correct it. Okay? info@wethepeopleconvention.org. So that wraps up today's podcast. I sure appreciate you joining us. I hope you have a good week. Help the people you know in these tornado areas. Okay? Man, it's been tough. It's been tough. Lots of them. But hopefully the weather's going to smooth out. It's getting warmer. It was 82 degrees here the other day in April. Wow. So enjoy the spring weather. Be a happy warrior. Love your family. Love yourself. Love your country. Love your freedom. And then fight for it. Okay? God willing, we'll both be back together again next week. You've been listening to the We the People Convention weekly news and opinion podcast. My name is Tom Zawistowski. May God bless you and continue to bless the United States of America. See you next week.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight